Hi all, I have a fascinating game to show you from the US Chess Championship this year. Zherebukh, the new kid on the block from the Ukraine, playing Varuzhan Akobian, a US Championship veteran, and been involved in interesting incidents like the Wesley So one about note-taking in previous years. But Varuzhan's a really nice guy. I met him at Gibraltar. He's a really nice, approachable GM, and he's a very good coach as well, and gives lectures and stuff, like on the French defence, for example. And this game was actually a French defence. So e4, Varuzhan plays the French defence. We see the Tarrasch variation. Now here, very active move against knight d2 instead of knight f6, which encourages the closing of the centre. The active c5, second most popular, just by a little bit to the main move knight f6 in inverted commas. So e takes d5 was played here, and we have queen takes d5. With the knight on d2, it's not so scary, the tempo gains on the queen, but they do exist. D takes, knight f6 is played here. Just for those theoretically interested, queen takes c5. I believe that's actually playable as well. But usually it's knight f6 or bishop takes c5. We have this knight gf3, and usually here it's bishop takes c5 by nearly an order of 3-1 to what was played queen takes c5. But if there's no great way of exposing the queen here, then this is fine, because fundamentally actually black's got a nice pawn structure here, quite solid. This bishop can actually deploy on this diagonal quite usefully as well. We have knight bd7, castles, queen c7, which actually vacates that key c5 square, which means knight c5 could run with tempo to try and grab that light square bishop or nudge it. Queen e2, knight c5, bishop c4, bishop d6. Black has a very pleasant position indeed actually here. There aren't any major positional problems in this position. The structure is fantastic. It's pretty solid. It's difficult to even sack a piece there. The bishop, which you might think is sometimes bad in the French, can try and get onto this diagonal, which is actually what happens. White plays b3. Perhaps this is not the most accurate idea. It weakens some dark squares, and it's a bit controversial to just think about simply doubling black's pawns sometimes. We see a6 here, stopping an e-bishop b5, and b5 would be nice. Grabbing the light square bishop might be a nice option. White stops that. Just b6 now, not castling, putting the bishop on this nice diagonal. Black has a beautiful position. So much so, I think black has more than equalized just to get an evaluation of the position here, not variations. Yeah, technically the engine actually likes black here. Something's gone slightly wrong for black to have such a good position here. I am slightly biased for this because I've just seen very crushing games with black. Sometimes John Spillman in the past, he's been blowing away people with the black pieces from similar positions. There's something not quite right about, I believe, White's played this. We see rook fd1, and black just castles, daring White to double the pawns. So you might think, well, structure versus piece activity, giving black this trump card, the dark square bishop, is it worth it? That makes this game so interesting to me. Is it a controversial decision to take? Isn't it logical to double the pawns? Let's see. White did take. He didn't have to. I mean, he could play a move like rook e1. The thing is, it can get quite passive. As an example, let's just see this variation. With the knight coming to d5, if it's left to live, can hit f4, that dreaded f4 square. And actually black can threaten to be much better soon. There's even a nifty manoeuvre here available just to emphasize this beautiful diagonal and the knight, and it's nice for black. So yeah, the knight might be a menace later. So it's taken off. G takes, queen e3, but this is very easily parried with bishop f4 with tempo. The queen switches here, And black doesn't mind playing f5. He plays f5, doesn't want to protect that pawn. So structurally, okay, it's like a structural concession for the bishop pair. But this c-file is also a pretty dangerous thing for white. That semi-open c-file there. b4, knight e4. This c-file is a real pain. Queen's come off. Black just looks great here. Knight c4. Okay, this is attended to with rook b8. But, you know, also, it's funny that b5 is possible. You might think this goes into knight a5, and that's nasty. But actually, look at this. This continuation. Even if b5 drops, knight c3, forking rook and bishop, hitting the bishop. This is going to be good for black after bishop h6. So the bishop's still hanging. Bishop g7. And the rooks are skewered, so we get this tactic knight e2 winning the exchange. It's just an illustrative variation showing black's really the king of the dark squares here with that dark square bishop, and that c-file's dangerous. But anyway, rook b8's played. Now knight c3 could be on the cards. White did take that, and we have simply rook takes c2. Knight d7 hitting the other rook, that just doubles with the one on c2. Bishop d3. Rook b2. Now f2 might be hanging now under the right circumstance. So that's taken off. White volunteering another bishop, so he's left with the two knights. And they're stumbling around. He's also kind of undoubled this to double these pawns, but these are in the centre. So what's going on here? Rook d4, setting up a pin. But black just supports that. He's got nice central control in this position. And you might wonder, is knight e5 possible? White played actually a move which kind of loses immediately. Before we look at the move which kind of loses immediately, if knight e5, let's see, there's bishop g5, and to be followed by this, black's just standing a lot better here. It's no doubt if white tries to parry that, this is just a nice position for black. So we have this move rook ad1, e takes, and there's a slight snag with this tactic by white. It was a pretty bad position anyway. Can you spot it? Black to play and win. If I give you 5 seconds starting from now. Okay, the back row is weak. That's a clue. If you want another 5 seconds to pause the video, I hope you see this. Very forcing, clinical, winning move. There's a semi-loose piece as well. So back row plus semi-loose piece if you want to work backwards. Or you could work forwards and look at all the forcing moves and also arrive at the same conclusion, which is rook d2. Emphasizes these, embarrasses these tactical issues in white's camp. At the same time, it's impossible for white to juggle these two issues here. Knight f6, king f7, and the knight's hanging. Okay, so the game ended here. You know, for rook e1, we just take that knight off. Yeah, I find there's something odd about this opening. It can sometimes really favour black, and I've seen many examples of that myself, with this bishop having an excellent diagonal sometimes in this particular variation of Tarrasch. So it's a good advert for the c5 line, knight d2 c5, move 3. This game, very concise game by Varuzhan Akobian against Zherebukh, who's 2605. Varuzhan's 2645. Great win for him there. Comments, questions, likes, shares appreciated, especially with French defence players. Thanks very much.